I had waited 7 years for this moment. 7 years of skipped dinners, second-hand clothes, and learning how to live without luxuries that others called normal. While my friends traveled and posted their smiling photos online, I stayed behind, working late, saving every penny, teaching myself how to survive on less so that someday I could have more. And finally, it was mine, the house, the dream, the reward for every sacrifice I had made in silence. I still remember the first time I turned the key in the lock. The click sounded like victory. Sunlight spilled through the doorway, catching on the fresh paint, and for the first time in my life I felt like I belonged somewhere. This wasn't just brick and wood. It was proof that I had built something with my own 2 hands, something no one could take from me, or at least that's what I believed then. The first thing I did was plan the housewarming. It felt natural. I wanted my family to see, to share in my joy, to finally understand why I had lived the way I did for so long. I phoned each one of them personally. My mother sounded distracted. My brothers barely listened. My cousins muttered vague promises, but I told myself it didn't matter. Once they saw the house, once they felt the atmosphere I had created, they would understand. I decorated every corner myself, strung soft lights across the garden, set out tables with food I spent days preparing. I even bought a dress, just one, something that made me feel beautiful, like the woman I had always wanted to become. When I caught my reflection in the mirror that evening, I smiled nervously, whispering, "This is it. This is the night it all changes." But I was wrong. At first I wasn't worried. Families run late. I poured drinks, lit candles, adjusted the chairs. I glanced at my phone every few minutes, expecting the screen to light up with calls, with laughter, with the sound of car doors outside. But there was nothing. Only silence. Half an hour passed. Then an hour. The food on the table began to cool, steam fading into the night air. I paced the hallway, heels clicking like a ticking clock, rehearsing excuses for them in my head. Maybe traffic was heavy. Maybe the babysitter canceled. Maybe they're all coming together, trying to surprise me. But the surprise never came. By midnight, the truth pressed down like a weight I could no longer ignore. The lights glowed for no one, the chairs sat empty, and I sat at the head of the table staring at untouched plates. My phone buzzed only once. My cousin sent a message. "Sorry, something came up. We'll visit another time." But another time never came. I lay awake that night with the dress still clinging to me, mascara streaking across the pillow, my chest hollow and aching. I told myself it was just bad timing, that next week they would come, that love doesn't simply vanish. But somewhere deep inside, a whisper told me the truth. This wasn't an accident. The following morning, I dragged myself to the cafe near my office, desperate for distraction. That's when I heard it. 2 of my relatives, sitting just a table away, laughing like the world owed them joy. "Did you see her little party?" one said, her voice thick with amusement. "She really thought we'd all show up for that house," the other replied, smirking over her teacup. My blood turned to ice. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been too busy. They had chosen not to come. And worse, my dream, the thing I had built from nothing, was a joke to them. I sat frozen, my nails digging crescents into my palms, every word they spoke cutting deeper. They laughed about how pathetic it was, how I wasted my life just to end up alone in a house no one cared about. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. All I could think was, why? Why would they do this to me? I left before they saw me, stumbling into the cold air, shame burning across my skin like fire. But as I walked home, the shame hardened into something else, something sharper. Rage. I replayed every year I had lived without their support. Every time I had called and no one answered. Every time they dismissed my sacrifices as foolish, my dreams as impossible. And now, this final humiliation. That night, staring at the empty chairs around my table, I made myself a promise. If they wanted to laugh at me in whispers and shadows, then I would drag their secrets into the light. If they wanted to pretend I was nothing, then I would make sure they remembered me as the storm that ruined everything they thought was safe. I didn't know how yet. I didn't know when, but I knew this much. I would have my revenge, and when it came, they would wish they had stood beside me that night instead of abandoning me. The next morning, I woke up in the silence of my new home. The walls that had felt warm and alive just days ago now seemed hollow, like they were listening to my every thought. My reflection in the mirror didn't look like me. Anymore, it looked like a stranger dressed in success, but carrying a shadow that no one else could see. For days, I kept asking myself the same question. Why? Why would they treat me like this? Families fight, families misunderstand, but to come together and deliberately humiliate me? That was different. That was cruel. I tried to ignore it, to bury myself in work, but the whispers followed me. At the grocery store, I caught sight of another cousin laughing with someone, their eyes darting toward me before quickly turning away. At a family WhatsApp group, I noticed my messages were being seen but never answered. My heart sank each time, realizing the truth. They weren't just ignoring me that night. They were cutting me out entirely. And then, the real blow came. I overheard my mother on the phone. She didn't know I was in the next room, and maybe if she had, she wouldn't have said the words that would haunt me. She thinks buying that house makes her better than us. She doesn't realize money can't buy family. Her voice was cold, not the soft, worried tone I grew up with. It felt like venom. I nearly dropped the cup of tea I was holding. My chest tightened, breath ragged, and I pressed my hand over my mouth to stop the sob from escaping. My own mother, the person I thought would be proud, the one I worked so hard to impress, was the root of it all. She had turned them against me. That night I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My stomach twisted with the realization. They didn't skip my housewarming out of laziness. They skipped it because they wanted me to feel small. They wanted to teach me a lesson. That no matter how much I achieved, I would always be alone if I didn't bow to them. But something inside me hardened. If they thought my success made me arrogant, then they hadn't seen anything yet. I began watching them from the shadows. Social media was their stage, and I was their silent audience. My brothers flaunting expensive trips funded by debts they never intended to pay back. My cousins bragging about their businesses while I knew the truth. They were drowning in loans, hiding it behind filters and captions. My mother whispering into everyone's ear, turning them against each other when it suited her, pretending to be the martyr. Every post, every smile, every lie. I saved it all. Screenshots, recordings, small details no one else noticed. It was like building a puzzle piece by piece. And slowly, the picture became clear. They didn't hate me because I was arrogant. They hated me because I was proof of everything they weren't. I had worked hard, sacrificed, built something on my own. They had cut corners, begged favors, pretended to be what they weren't, and deep down they knew it. But instead of fixing themselves, they united in the easiest way possible, by tearing me down. I remember sitting in my living room late one night, the glow of my laptop lighting up the room, staring at the collection of secrets I had gathered. It felt like holding fire in my hands. I could destroy them with a single spark, and yet part of me hesitated. These were my blood, my family. Did I really want to cross that line? The answer came unexpectedly. I was at work when my boss called me into his office. He slid a document across the desk and said, "I don't know what kind of family you have, but one of your relatives came here yesterday. They said some very unpleasant things about you." My heart nearly stopped. I scanned the document. It was an anonymous complaint claiming I was using the company's money for personal gain, that I was dishonest, untrustworthy, lies, all of it. But the damage was done. Even though my boss said he didn't believe it, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. The seed of doubt had been planted. My job, my reputation, the one place I thought was safe, it was under attack now. And in that moment, whatever hesitation I had left evaporated. This wasn't just about a missed party anymore. This was war. That night, I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of my house, and I swore to myself I would no longer be their victim. I would no longer cry into my pillow or beg for scraps of affection. I would strike back, and I would do it so carefully, so patiently, that by the time they realized what I had done, it would already be too late. But first, I had to wait. Because revenge, I realized, is not a storm that comes all at once. It's a slow fire, and the more it burns in silence, the hotter it becomes when it finally erupts. So I smiled, just a little, the first smile I'd felt in weeks. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. They thought they had silenced me. But really, I was just beginning to speak. My job, my reputation, the one place I thought was safe, it was under attack now. And in that moment, whatever hesitation I had left evaporated. This wasn't just about a missed party anymore. This was war. That night, I stood in the middle of my living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of my house, and I swore to myself I would no longer be their victim. I would no longer cry into my pillow or beg for scraps of affection. I would strike back, and I would do it so carefully, so patiently, that by the time they realized what I had done, It would already be too late. But first I had to wait. Because revenge, I realized, is not a storm that comes all at once. It's a slow fire, and the more it burns in silence, the hotter it becomes when it finally erupts. So I smiled, just a little. The first smile I'd felt in weeks. Let them laugh. Let them whisper. They thought they had silenced me. But really, I was just beginning to speak. I used to think revenge was loud, screaming, shouting, throwing things until the world noticed your pain. But as the days passed, I learned it wasn't noise that scared people. It was silence. It was the smile you wore when they expected you to break, and that's what I gave them. Silence. A smile. On the outside, I looked like I was moving on. I went to work, dressed sharply, and even posted cheerful updates about decorating my new home. My family must have thought they'd crushed me, that I was pretending just to save face. But behind the scenes, I was weaving a web, and they didn't even realize they were already tangled in it. The first thread I pulled was my cousin Samir. He loved to brag about his thriving business, but I knew the truth. He was drowning in unpaid loans, juggling creditors like a circus act. I had the receipts, literally. A friend of mine worked at the very bank he owed money to, and with a casual conversation over coffee, I learned just how close he was to defaulting. I didn't expose him. Not yet. Instead, I asked him for a favor. Something small, something easy, something he couldn't refuse. He agreed without hesitation, not realizing that by helping me, he just admitted how desperate he really was. One piece of leverage secured, but Samir was only the beginning. Next was my brother, Arif, the golden child, the one my mother always praised. "Why can't you be more like him?" she used to say. But I had seen his late-night messages. I knew about the affair he was hiding from his wife. Screenshots, timestamps, even a hotel receipt. Did I confront him? No. I tucked it away like a knife hidden beneath my sleeve. Every secret I collected became a weapon. And every weapon gave me power. But power without patience is just chaos. And I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. Because then came something I didn't expect. One evening, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice whispered, "You don't know me, but I know what your family did." My breath caught in my throat. The caller introduced herself as Layla, a distant relative who'd long been cast aside by the same people who betrayed me. She told me things I hadn't known, how my mother had spread lies to isolate her, how Samir had cheated her out of money in a fake investment scheme, how Arif had once humiliated her publicly to protect his own image. And then she said the words that made my blood run cold. "They've done this before. You're just their newest target." I sat in silence, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Part of me wanted to deny it, to believe that my family had some twisted love for me buried under their cruelty. But another part knew the truth. If they could betray Layla, if they could betray each other, then betraying me was nothing new. When I hung up, I walked into my empty kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the wall. My heart didn't ache anymore, it burned. This wasn't just about me. This was about a cycle of cruelty, of manipulation, of jealousy and control, and it had gone unchecked for far too long. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd crumble. But they didn't realize they had trained me my whole life to be exactly what I was becoming: a woman who no longer begged for love, a woman who no longer feared their judgment, a woman who knew their darkest secrets and wasn't afraid to use them. The first test came quicker than I imagined. At a small family gathering, my mother casually asked me in front of everyone how my job was going. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes sparkled with the satisfaction of knowing she had planted doubts at my workplace. It was a trap. She wanted me to stumble, to admit weakness, to give them something to laugh about later. But I didn't stumble. I smiled, lifted my glass, and said, "Actually, I was just offered a new project, a leadership role." The room went silent. I could feel the weight of their stares, the envy crawling across their faces. Even though the promotion wasn't official yet, I knew it was close, and saying it out loud was like twisting the knife. My mother's smile faltered. Arif looked away. Samir coughed into his drink. I had drawn first blood, and the best part? They had no idea it was intentional. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. Revenge wasn't just about exposing them. It was about watching them destroy themselves under the pressure of the truth. I carried. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to fight. All I had to do was wait. Because when the time came, when I finally pulled the trigger on everything I had collected, they wouldn't just fall. They would shatter, and I would be the one standing, smiling, while their perfect little masks crumbled to dust. Revenge doesn't start with explosions. It starts with whispers, with a hand that looks gentle but is quietly pushing someone toward the edge. That's how I began. Small steps. Silent traps. The first move was almost too easy. I casually mentioned to a mutual friend that Samir was doing so well with his business, even though I knew the truth. I said it loud enough for him to overhear, loud enough for him to feel the pressure of keeping up the illusion. That night, his social media was flooded with flashy posts, new clients, new deals, new promises, but I could see the cracks. Because 2 days later, a creditor showed up at his office. Someone had tipped them off that he was lying about his assets. I didn't need to watch the confrontation to know how it went. I just needed to wait for the message that came after midnight. "Can you lend me some money?" "Just until next week." I didn't answer. That silence was my reply. Next came Arif, my perfect brother, the pride of the family. He had always looked down on me, mocking me for being too serious or too ambitious. But I knew his secret now, and secrets have a way of unraveling when you nudge them just right. I didn't confront him directly. Instead, I asked his wife, innocently, if she wanted help planning a surprise dinner for him. Her eyes lit up, grateful for the idea, and she eagerly told me about his late nights at work. I nodded, hiding the storm that threatened to break inside me. That same week, she called me in tears. She had found the receipts I'd planted in his car. Receipts I had kept hidden until the perfect moment. Hotel rooms, dinners for two. The betrayal she felt was her own, but the spark that lit it, that was me. And when she cried to the rest of the family, when she whispered about his lies, I stayed silent, watching. My brother, the golden one, was no longer untouchable. But the most satisfying moment came at my mother's expense. For years, she had controlled everyone with her tongue. A single whisper from her could divide cousins, break marriages, ruin reputations. She loved being the center, the spider in the web. So I turned her own game against her. At a family lunch, I accidentally mentioned something. Layla had told me that my mother had once spread a rumor about an aunt stealing money from the family fund. I said it lightly, like it was an old story. But the aunt's face hardened instantly. Within minutes, old wounds reopened. Voices rose. Fingers pointed. My mother tried to deny it. But the more she spoke, the more tangled she became. By the end of the lunch, half the family wasn't speaking to her. And I just sat there sipping my drink as though I had no idea what I had started. Piece by piece, I was dismantling them. But revenge is never perfect. It always carries a risk. And my risk came in the form of a single message. Be careful. They're starting to suspect you. It was Layla again. She said some of them had begun whispering that I was too quiet lately, that I was different. She warned me that if I wasn't careful, they might catch on before my plan was complete. For a moment, fear clawed at me. What if they turned their attention back to me? What if they united again? Stronger this time, and I was the one who fell. But then I remembered something my grandmother once told me, back when I was a child. The one who knows the truth can always walk in the dark. The liars trip over their own shadows. And I realized, even if they suspected me, they could never prove it. Because I wasn't planting lies. I wasn't inventing stories. I was simply revealing the truth they had tried so hard to hide. The difference between us was simple. Their lives were fragile glass, built on deception. Mine was steel. I had suffered, I had endured, and now I was unbreakable. Still, I tightened my strategy. I moved slower, more careful. I used other people as messengers, never letting the fire touch my hands directly. I stayed sweet when they looked at me, stayed silent when they accused others, stayed invisible while the chaos spread, and little by little, I watched the pillars of their so-called power crumble. Samir's creditors circled him like vultures. Arif's wife moved out, taking their child with her. My mother, once feared, was now avoided. Her words met with suspicion instead of obedience. It should have felt like victory, and in a way it did, but the fire in me wasn't satisfied yet. Because I knew the final blow had to be bigger, not whispered in living rooms, not gossiped at family lunches. It had to be public, inescapable, a strike that would burn their masks in front of everyone they tried to impress. And as if the universe was listening, the opportunity presented itself. A grand wedding, a family event where every relative, every friend, every business partner would be gathered under one roof. A stage big enough for truth to echo. I looked at the invitation and felt my pulse quicken. This was it, the perfect stage for my revenge. The invitation sat on my table for 3 days before I touched it again. At first, I just stared at it. White cardstock with gold lettering, the kind of expensive design my family loved to flaunt. A cousin's wedding. The kind of gathering where everyone put on their best clothes, their brightest smiles, and their thickest masks. It was perfect. But if I wanted this to work, I couldn't simply show up with accusations. No, that would make me look bitter, unstable, jealous. I had to be precise, ruthless, calculated. So I began planning. Every night, after work, I would sit in my quiet living room with my laptop open, combing through the evidence I had collected, Samir's overdue loan notices, Arif's hotel receipts, and late-night messages. My mother's voice recordings where she lied and manipulated relatives, even screenshots of my family, mocking me in private chats while pretending to support me in public. It wasn't just a folder anymore. It was an arsenal, and the wedding would be my battlefield. The question was, how much destruction did I want? Did I want to humiliate one of them? Or all of them at once? Did I want whispers? Or did I want gasps so loud the walls themselves would remember? The more I thought about it, the more my decision became clear. All of them. No one would be spared. But to do that, I needed allies, or at least pawns. So I reached out to Layla. She was hesitant at first. If you go through with this, there's no turning back, she whispered over the phone. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. There never was, Layla. And then I told her my plan. Step by step, I laid it out. How I would attend the wedding, how I would carry myself, how I would release the evidence piece by piece until the room drowned in it. Layla listened, silent at first, and then I heard something new in her voice. Not fear, not hesitation, excitement. They deserve it, she finally said. Every single one of them. That's when I knew she would help me. The day of the wedding arrived faster than I expected. I woke up with my heart pounding, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. The morning light spilled across my bedroom floor, but instead of warmth, it felt like a spotlight, reminding me of what was coming. I dressed carefully. Not too flashy, not too simple. A deep emerald dress that hugged my figure but whispered elegance. I wanted them to see me, not as desperate or broken, but as someone untouchable. Someone they could no longer laugh at. When I arrived, the venue was already buzzing with chatter. Music and the clinking of glasses. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Tables were dressed in gold and white, and everywhere I looked, relatives plastered on smiles that didn't reach their eyes. I walked in slowly, letting them see me, letting them whisper. I could feel their eyes tracking me, their voices low but sharp. Why did she come? She must be desperate. Look at her pretending to be happy. I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I just smiled, soft, calm, dangerous. And then, the first move. While everyone was busy with greetings, I slipped my phone to the DJ, a young man Layla had already bribed. He nodded without a word, sliding it into his system as if nothing had happened. My heart raced, but my face never betrayed it. As the ceremony began, I sat quietly, clapping, smiling, playing the perfect guest. But inside, every muscle was wound tight, waiting for the moment to snap. And that moment came during the reception. The speeches had begun. Long, flowery words about family, unity, tradition. My mother stood near the front, smiling as though she were queen of the evening, her hand resting proudly on Arif's shoulder. Samir strutted around like he was the groom himself, laughing too loud, making sure everyone noticed him. They looked invincible. And that's when the first recording played. At first, the sound was faint, drowned under clinking glasses and murmurs. But then it grew louder, clearer. My mother's voice, sharp and venomous. She thinks buying that house makes her better than us. She doesn't realize money can't buy family. The room froze. Glasses hovered mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the speakers, then slowly toward my mother. Her smile faltered. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did she really say that? Was that her voice? I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, as though I too were shocked. And then, the second blow came. The screen behind the stage lit up. Photos, messages, receipts, every piece of evidence timed perfectly to appear one after the other. Samir's unpaid debts, Arif's hotel receipts, screenshots of family group chats where they mocked me, called me arrogant, plotted to put me in my place. Gasps filled the room. A few people even shouted. Arif's wife stood up, her face pale, her hands shaking. Samir tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. My mother stammered, denying, but the proof was undeniable. And me? I just sat there, sipping my drink. The chaos unfolded around me like a storm, and I was the eye of it, calm, silent, untouchable. For years they had laughed at me. For years they had tried to bury me, and now, in front of everyone they wanted to impress, their masks had shattered. But this was only the beginning. Because what I had revealed tonight was just a fraction. The real destruction was still waiting. The room was no longer a wedding hall. It was a battlefield. Voices clashed against one another like swords. Some guests gasped, others whispered, and a few, those who had always secretly disliked my family, smiled. Behind their hands, enjoying the show. Arif's wife was crying openly, her mascara staining her cheeks. Samir was arguing with a creditor who had apparently been invited to the wedding, his face flushed red with panic. And my mother? She stood frozen, trembling with rage, her eyes darting around the room, searching for anyone to defend her. But no one came. The web she had spun for years had finally collapsed, and she was standing in the ruins. I sipped my drink slowly, savoring the bitterness on my tongue. It matched the taste of the moment. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" she finally screamed, pointing at the DJ booth. Her voice cracked, a desperate shriek that silenced even the whispers for a moment. But the DJ, bound by the deal with Layla, pretended to fumble with the controls until another recording played. This time it was Arif's voice. "Just keep her out of it. She thinks she's better than us. One day she'll see who really controls this family." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. Arif's face turned pale as his wife glared at him, shaking her head like she'd never known the man standing in front of her. He opened his mouth to explain, but another image flashed on the screen behind him. His hotel receipt, with the timestamp circled in red. The room erupted. Guests pointed. Some laughed nervously. Others whispered in disgust. His wife didn't wait for an explanation. She picked up her purse, grabbed their child's hand, and stormed out. The doors slammed behind her with a finality that made Arif flinch. I leaned back in my chair, the corner of my lips curving upward. One mask down, 2 more to go. Samir tried to deflect the attention by raising his voice, swearing that the receipts weren't real, that the messages were fabricated. But his words only drew more attention. Someone shouted from across the room, "Then why do the banks keep calling you?" His face turned scarlet. Sweat glistened on his forehead. And as though fate itself had been waiting for this moment, his phone began to ring, loud, persistent. Everyone turned to look at him. He froze, his trembling hand pulling the phone out of his pocket. The name flashing on the screen was visible even from a distance. Bank collections. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was pity mixed with ridicule, the kind of laughter that digs under the skin and stays there forever. Samir bolted for the exit, shoving past guests, his face buried in his hands. 2 masks down. And then there was my mother. She tried to regain control, tried to gather the scraps of dignity still clinging to her. She raised her voice above the crowd, saying it was all lies, that someone was trying to destroy her family. She pointed at me. Her finger shook, but her voice steadied with venom. "It's her. She's behind this. She's always been jealous. She set this up." All eyes turned toward me. For a moment, silence stretched across the hall. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I set down my glass, rose to my feet, and looked straight at her. And then softly I spoke. "Jealous of what? A brother who cheats? A cousin who steals? A mother who destroys her own blood for fun?" Gasps filled the room again, but I wasn't finished. I walked forward, slow, deliberate, every step echoing against the marble floor. When I stood in front of her, I pulled my phone from my purse, tapped the screen, and let the final recording play. It was her voice again, but not the cold, sharp tone from before. This was worse. This was intimate. "She's nothing. She thinks she's smart, but I'll make sure she loses everything, even her job." The crowd murmured in shock. Heads turned toward her, eyes narrowing, judging, and then I spoke again, louder this time, my voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. She already tried. She filed false complaints at my workplace. She wanted me destroyed. But instead, here we are. The hall erupted in chaos. Some guests shouted at her, others demanded answers, and a few simply shook their heads, disgust etched on their faces. My mother stumbled back, her body trembling, her mask gone. She looked small, smaller than I had ever seen her. I should have felt triumph. I should have felt joy. But what I felt instead was something colder, something sharper. This wasn't enough. They had humiliated me in silence, in shadows. They had made me cry into my pillow, doubt my worth, feel like nothing. If I wanted true revenge, I couldn't just expose them. I had to strip them of everything, not just their masks, their power, their influence, their pride. And so, as I looked into my mother's tear-filled eyes, I knew the wedding was only the beginning. The real climax, the strike that would leave them, shattered beyond repair, was still to come. And I was ready, more ready than I had ever been in my life.